Parshas Shlach. I want to question three premises that I think most people agree on. One, the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. The second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of sinas chinam. It's a Gemara in Yuma. Question number one, is that really the core of it? What is the core of sinas chinam? Question number two, we know that the Meraglim, who sinned they were the spies. They said over things that we cannot come to Eretz Yisrael. Was there chet lashon hara? We know the Midrash says that it's close to the parsha of Miriam getting tzaras to teach us that we know the lesson of lashon hara. So is that really the message of the Meraglim? Don't speak lashon hara. And the third assumption is we know that Calev he was one of the two Meraglim who did not fall. We know that he went where? He went to Chevron. In Chevron, he went to Ma'aras HaMachpelah, he went to Kivrei Avoisov, to daven, so that he doesn't fall with the other Meraglim. Is that the third message of the Parsha, that when things are difficult, we should go daven by Kivrei Avos? So I want to question these three things. When the Meraglim came back, they brought with them huge grapes. It says that they had long poles carrying it. And the Midrash tells a little different story. The Midrash says that what happened really is that Calev shows up and he says to the people, I know you don't want to bring the fruit because you don't want to show that the land is good. If you don't bring the fruit, I'm taking out a sword right now. If you could either kill me or you're going to have to take the fruit. And they took the fruit. Midrash says the reason why they took the fruit was from the story that came first. Calev goes with Klal Yisrael, and he's one of the 12 Meraglim. Now, before we get into this part of the story, I want to give a preface. The Midrash says that from the second Bnei Yisrael asked to bring Meraglim, they were doomed. It was known that the Jewish people who left Mitzrayim were not coming into Eretz Yisrael at large. For most of them ended up dying. Their kids did come into Eretz Yisrael. There were a few exceptions, Shevet Levi, and maybe a few other people. But in large, Bnei Yisrael did not go in as soon as they asked for Meraglim. So I want to talk about it for a second, getting back to Calev. So Calev, they come in from the Negev, it says in the Pasuk, and when they come in through the Negev, they come to Chevron. And the Pasuk says that Chevron was built 7 years before Mitzrayim. Now, if you look back in Parshas Noach, when it talks about Ham, he has Canaan and Mitzrayim as being his children. And Canaan and Mitzrayim are two places where the Jewish people were. They were going from Mitzrayim and going to Canaan. That's the message of the Torah. Calev, when he gets to the fortified city, which was fortified with fortresses, he turns and he says to the people, I'm going in. Bnei Yisrael said, you can't go in. You're going to go in there, you're going to be discovered. You're going to be discovered as a spy. Now, they didn't realize that every city they went to, there were massive funerals taking place. And these funerals were taking place by Hashem. Hashem set it up in such a way that people will be so busy, they won't notice the Meraglim coming in. So the rest of the Meraglim said, we're not going into Chevron. Because there's the Yelidei Anak, there's giants there. The Pasuk says their names were Achiman, Sheshai, and Salmi. And Calev said, I'm going in. And they're going to ask you, why are you going in? He's going to say to them, I'm going in. You know why I'm going in? Because my great-grandparents are buried here in Chevron, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And Hashem promised them that their children, me, will get this land. And he took a stand. And Bnei Yisrael said, the other Meraglim, the leaders of the other Shvatim, not from Shevet Yehuda, they said, you're crazy, we're not going in. You're going to get killed. You can't go out and show everybody and tell everybody and take a risk. So what's going on over here? The message over here is that it wasn't that he went to daven, it was that he went to daven. He had a presence. He stood in front of Kever Avosov and he said, this is my land. I'm here to take this land. And this really goes back to a Zohar. The Zohar says that Sefer Bamidbar separates between Chaylin de Oraisa and Chaylin de Mashkana. The soldiers of the giving of the Torah and the soldiers of coming into the land in the Mishkan. When Klal Yisrael got the Torah, something happened. There was a revelation with Mitzias Mitzrayim, culminating in the giving of the Torah, that never happened before. And immediately it was followed by Chet HaEgel. Chet HaEgel was where Klal Yisrael did not find a way of connecting to Hashem after Moshe promised to come down with the Torah. He didn't come down. And they took the parchment that was used by Moshe Rabbeinu to throw into the Nile River to rise up the bones of Yosef, the Shor. Yosef, it says, when Yosef died in Mitzrayim, the Mitzrim didn't want to let go of him. They knew that he brought blessing to the land. He had brought 7 years of plentiful and provided for the Egyptians. Even though they later forgot him, they put him in a lead coffin to the bottom of the ocean, of the Nile River. And Moshe Rabbeinu, 3 days before Yetzias Mitzrayim, the only thing he's interested in is getting Yosef's bones. And he writes on a parchment, Alei Shor. He throws it into the river, and Yosef's bones rise. That paper, Micha, was one of the babies that was in the walls that died. And Hashem said to Moshe, all these children who are dying, they end up going to be Rishayim. So if you want, take a baby and see what happens. And this Micha took out this parchment. And Bnei Yisrael, when they went in the Yam Suf, when the Yam Suf crossed for them, and they crossed the Yam Suf and it split for them, Bnei Yisrael went in carrying Pesel Micha, carrying this parchment, knowing full well that this parchment has the power to bring the golden calf. If we look on the Merkava, on the right side, on the east, is a lion, Aryeh. Aryeh Kilevi Yakum, that was Yehuda, that was the Shevet of Calev. On the west was the shore, was Binyamin, Yosef. Yosef wasn't represented, it was read through Ephraim, Menashe, and Binyamin. So they take this Egel and they say, this is the God that took us out of Mitzrayim. What does that mean? It means that Klal Yisrael were looking for a way of having something that they could call Hashem. They needed a physical representation so that they could internalize a connection to Hashem. Why did this happen? What was lacking in their revelation at Har Sinai? Had there ever been such a revelation? Such a revelation that the Torah promises. No one will ever say that God spoke to an entire nation and it never happened again. No, all other nations, all other religions base their doctrine on the Torah. It's undeniable. But what happened? There was a revelation that was b'derech nes. It was miraculous. Dor HaMidbar were the miraculous nation. So to answer the question, why did Hashem know right away that these people aren't coming into Eretz Yisrael? Because they were b'derech nes. The whole Midbar was Chaylin Doiraisa, was the soldiers of the giving of the Torah. They were b'derech nes. They were in the way of miracles. Miracles and natural miracles was the question between Calev and the other Meraglim. When we go fast forward to when they finally do come in Sefer Yeshua, so over there, Pinchas and Calev are sent into Yericho. And they find Rachav, and Rachav hides them, and word gets out. The pasuk says, word gets out that the spies are here, and messengers came from the king to kill them and capture them, or capture them. So Rachav says, I want to hide you. I want to hide both of you. And the pasuk says afterwards, Vatitzbaneu, they hid one. Which one did they hide? Pinchas or Calev? So it says that they hid Calev. Why? Why not Pinchas? Pinchas, the Midrash said, I'm a Kohen. A Kohen forever is like a malach. A malach cannot be seen. A Kohen Gadol is like a malach. His entire existence is a spiritual dimension, so he can't be seen. Therefore, don't hide me. And that's what happened. So over there, Calev decided to hide. That means he didn't go b'derech nes, he went b'derech teva. And Pinchas, HaKohen, who was Pinchas Eliyahu Hanavi, he went b'derech hanes. He said, I'm like a malach. Let's go back to Parshas Shlach. When they come in, the pasuk says that when they made their report about how they felt when they saw the giants of the land, these three giants in Chevron, what does the pasuk say? It says, "V'heginu be'einehem kechagavim." We were in their eyes like grasshoppers. The Midrash Rabbah asks, what do you mean? How do you know what they were thinking? Perhaps they saw you like malachim. Perhaps they saw you like angels. Like the angels that Avraham Avinu said, Hashem promised Avraham Avinu that your children will be b'nei malachim. Malachim teitzei mimenu, that you're going to have malachim. And that was the Midrash's question, and that was Calev's question. Perhaps we're like malachim. Meaning that Bnei Yisrael went and said bad. They said Lashon Hara about Eretz Yisrael. They said, we can't go up. We can't conquer Eretz Yisrael. But why did they say that? Why were they saying how difficult it is to conquer Eretz Yisrael? Because they were people working b'derech nes. They wanted to show the beauty of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, that He's able to do nisim like no other nisim that ever happened. And that's their mistake. That's why Hashem realized these people cannot come into Eretz Yisrael. They mistakenly said Lashon Hara, but yes, what was the Lashon Hara? The Lashon Hara was that from a teva, from a natural way, there is no way we could win this war. The only way could be through Hashem. And what was Calev's message? Calev's message was, Hashem promised Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov that He's going to give this land. You are Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov's children. Go to Chevron. Face the giants. Face the fortified cities that was fortified 7 years before Mitzrayim, meaning that this is an ancient fortified city, that it was impossible to penetrate. Go there and announce to everyone that you are the great-grandchildren of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and you have come to your land to claim your portion. And that's why in Sefer Yeshua it says that Yeshua gave to Calev Chevron. Because he davened? Because he went to daven. He showed presence. He showed up, and he said, I am here. Going back, we say the chet of the Meraglim was that they didn't learn from Yetzias Mitzrayim. They didn't internalize Yetzias Mitzrayim. That part of Yetzias Mitzrayim they didn't internalize was Daber al Bnei Yisrael v'Yisou. Speak to Bnei Yisrael. And who was the one who went v'Yisou? That was Binyamin. Binyamin went forward. Midrash asks, why is it that when Bnei Yisrael did two major sins. Before we get to this question, I'll ask another question. Why is it by every great thing there needs to be a fall? And why is the fall always predetermined? Because says the chidushai Harim, says the tzadik, Reb Tzadok HaKohen, says the sfas Emes, says that tzadik, that every time in history that there is a war, it's all predetermined. Look at Navi. Every time there was a war, they went and they asked Hashem, they asked the Urim V'Tumim, or they asked with the Navi, they asked Shmuel, are we going to win this war? Why do they ask that? Because it's predetermined. The only question is when we get up on our feet. Like Taisus says, Taisus asks, how could we ever daven for someone who's sick? You know the answer? Because Hashem only on Rosh Hashanah says when the person's going to get sick. He doesn't say when he's going to get better. So they didn't learn from Mitzrayim. They didn't learn from Mitzrayim that you need to daber b'nei Yisrael vayiso, that you should move forward. That you need to go away from b'derech hanes and start working in b'derech hateva. Calev alone goes to Chevron. And the nes that happens was that they saw him like a malach. They saw him like an angel. But Moshe Rabbeinu, the difference, getting back to what we're saying, the difference between the egel, chet egel, of the golden calf, which happened right by Har Sinai, and the difference between the chet meraglim, which happened supposedly right before we were supposed to come into Eretz Yisrael, is that when Moshe davened for chet egel, he said, you promised Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. But by chet meraglim, he didn't daven, you promised Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Why didn't he daven that? Because they already threw that away. They already said to Calev, don't expose yourself. Don't go to Chevron. Don't face the Malachim. Let's go quietly. Let's hide. Let's not go and make a claim. Because they wanted to show how difficult Eretz Yisrael is to conquer, how much difficulties a person will have to be able to achieve this, and how many miracles, open miracles, will be necessary. And Calev's answer was no. Yes, there will be open miracles, but Bechina of Eretz Yisrael is Naseh, of doing. You need to go ahead and do. And that's why the Dora Midbar did not enter Eretz Yisrael, because they had the problem of Naseh. By Chet HaEgel, the Midrash says, Kilkulu b'naseh yizoru b'nishma. You've messed up the ability to take action. Now, start listening. The Zohar says that on Shabbos is the day of Nishma. That's where we get the Neshama Yisera, which didn't have a kilkul. It wasn't ruined through the action. There was a certain part, a certain deep 50th level neshama inside every Jew, which did not get affected by Chet HaEgel. That 50th part, that neshama yisera, that is the nishma part. And no longer do we say Vayhi Erev Vayivoiker. No longer do we say after Chet HaEgel that the night comes before the day, that the week influences Shabbos. From now on, Shabbos is influencing the week. Of course, this is on one level. We say Shleisha Kame Shabta Shleisha Vasa Shabta, that every Shabbos gets Yanika from the 3 day, gets sustenance from the 3 days before and the 3 days after. We also say that the 3 meals of Shabbos, the Friday night meal affects Sunday, Monday of the next week. Morning meal affects Tuesday, Wednesday, and Suda Shlishis affects Thursday, Friday. But the Shabbos itself is affecting the week. The Nishma is affecting the Naseh. We now take from first listening and then going through. But the action that we do is an action after we listen to Hashem. That Hashem says, and we come there and we stand in Chevron and we say to our grandfathers, we say, we are here. We've come to fulfill your prophecy. That's the message of Calev. The message of Calev is yes, it's b'derech nes, but also it's not all b'derech nes. We don't need to look for all the difficulties. We need to look for what Hashem promised. What's Hashem's will for me today? Do I come to Eretz Yisrael? Do I come to Chevron? Do I face the giants? Do I face the fortified cities? And getting back to one of the first questions we asked, we say that why was the Beis HaMikdash destroyed? The message of the Meraglim, by the Meraglim it says that when they heard from this, the Bnei Yisrael heard that the Meraglim did not internalize the message of Mitzrayim, the Bnei Yisrael started crying. And that was the sin that they started crying, says the Midrash. Why? Because we know that in going to war, the Torah says, Mia ish shayar rach libov, any person whose heart has fear in their heart, they just don't go to war. They don't need to go. So Klal Yisrael, had they not cried and said, let's go back to Mitzrayim, had they just said, we're afraid, that would have been enough. Hashem would have accepted that. Would have been fine. You're allowed to be afraid. Just don't go to war. So Hashem will either find people like Bnei Levi, who were not afraid, and say, okay, you go to war. Or wait until more people are ready to go to war and are not afraid. But their chet was that they wanted Hashem to do everything. They said, if you're not going to do everything, let's be in control. Getting back to one of the original three questions I asked, or we asked, was, and when they cried for those tears, those bitter tears, Hashem said, Atem bechisem bechias shov tivku l'doros. You have cried bitter tears for no reason. All you needed to do was take action. You're going to cry forever. I'm going to bring the galus, and the Churban Beis HaMikdash is going to happen. What's that have to do with anything? And we know the Gemara in Yuma says that the Beis HaMikdash Sheni, even though they had all the Maisim Tovim, they had Torah and they had mitzvahs and they had Daf Yomi and they had tzedakah and they had chesed and they had all these things, but it was for sinas chinam. Doesn't that sound strange? What type of sinas chinam did they have if they're following all the mitzvahs? My Rebbe, Rav Asher Zelig Rubenstein, Zecher Tzadik v'Kodesh Levrocha, says over from Avraham Yafin to look in the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says something a little bit different. But you'll probably never hear this for people who only learn the Bavli. The Yerushalmi came first, we know. We know the halacha is that we follow the Bavli. But the Yerushalmi came first. And on Dvarim that are negeh to Eretz Yisrael, we follow the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says, "V'abayis sheni afa pisha hoyebayis kol tuvei kol midos toivos." They did everything correctly. Aval oyavu es memoinam. They loved their money. V'sonu ishes reyeu, and they couldn't stand each other. The root of the Meraglim, we said, was that they wanted to rely on Hashem. The root of the Meraglim was they wanted everything to follow Hashem. But the root of the Churban Beis HaMikdash was she'ohavu es mamoinam. They loved their money. And the love of money was what brought them to have arguments with each other. If we look in the Klal Yisrael, we find in the history, we find that when they went out of Mitzrayim, Avraham, before that, was promised, we're going to leave with a tremendous amount of wealth. This wealth was the Dei Zahav, was the too much gold that caused them to build Pesel Micha. When they threw the petek that said, Alei Shor, into the fire, and the shore, what they saw in Har Sinai, they wanted a shore because the shore was one of the right side was Yehuda. And they wanted that representation. They wanted to have something that they could look at and say, and Yehuda is Calev. Calev! Calev was the one who said no. Was it because they spoke Lashon Hara? Yes, they spoke Lashon Hara. But what was the underpinning of this Lashon Hara? What was the core belief? They wanted to say the truth, it says. They wanted to say the truth. But they didn't understand that they need to daber el bnei Yisrael v'yisau. Hashem gave you a message. He wants you to go to Eretz Yisrael. Yes, it's difficult. Know that this is the message. And it really goes back to thoughts. What's the core belief? And that's why their children were able to come to Eretz Yisrael. Because their children, the children of the Dora Midbar, were Chaylin de Mashkana. They were the ones who knew how to work the land, how to take into the lowest port, the lowest level, and rise that up. And this is what the Zohar says: Chaylin de Reis and Chaylin de Mashkana. That we have the soldiers who work b'derech nes, and we have the soldiers who work b'derech hateva. When we see b'derech hateva, there's also b'derech hanes and b'derech hateva. But the ikar here is daber el bnei Yisrael v'yisau, to go to Chevron, to be willing to take the risk, to bring the geula. And the Chet HaMeraglim is one of the chatoyim which stays with Klal Yisrael to this day. Can we go up? Today we have 7 million Jews living in Eretz Yisrael. It's unclear how the geula will finally happen. The Vilna Gaon says that when Yaakov Avinu met with Esav in Parshas Vayishlach, Perek Lamed Beis, that was the story of the Golus. And at the end, the last 3 psukim in Perek Lamed Gimel is the Ikvasa de Mashiach. This is what Rabbi Chonon Wasserman writes in his Sefer Ikvasa de Mashiach. He brings the Gaon, and he says that the last 3, and he wrote this in 1939, quoting the Gaon who lived in the 18th century. And he says that the last 3 psukim say that Yaakov comes to Eretz Yisrael. Vayovei Shalom, he comes to Shalom. Shalom was Malki Tzedek, who was the Melech of Shalom, which is Yerushalayim. He comes to Yerushalayim. Vayota Oyala, and he plants and he puts down his tent, and he puts it in the tent where his forefathers. That's the second to last pasuk, and the last pasuk says, "Vayivin sham mizbeach laHashem, vayikra Hashem loy el elehei Yaakov." Hashem calls to Yaakov, and he calls him El. He calls him a God, like Rashi says, b'Shem HaMedrash, that he became God, and the way the Sifsei Chachamim explains, that means that because he brought the Shekhinah down to the earth, because he represented HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world, he became Hashem. We find that in Yeshayahu it says, in Perek Yud Tes Pasuk of Gimel, it says, "Bayayich Yaakov Yitzchak Yisrael." I'm not sure if that's the Perek. I think it's somewhere else. I don't remember exactly where, but it says Bayayich Yaakov Yitzchak Yisrael. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kivyochel says to Yaakov Avinu and to Bnei Yisrael, "You are my creator." Like we know that Kiddush HaChodesh is up to Klal Yisrael. We decide when HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes Yom Kippur and when he makes Rosh Hashanah. That since Brias HaOlam and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the Torah, Emes is with Klal Yisrael. We decide what is Emes, what is Torah. But the final redemption, it says, and this is in Perek Yutes, Pasuk of Gimel in Yeshayahu, it says, Baruch Ami Mitzrayim Nachlosi Yisrael. Now, it says Baruch Ami Mitzrayim. What does that mean? It says that there will be 3 parts: Ashur, Mitzrayim, and Bnei Yisrael. And Mitzrayim will then be called Ami Mitzrayim, my nation. Can you imagine Baruch Ami Mitzrayim is going to be at the end of the days? At the end of the days, the purpose of the Galus, says the Zohar in many places, the purpose and Reb Chaim Vital says this, B'Shem the Arizal, and the Moshe David Vali says this, the Rebbe of the Ramchal. Purpose of the Golus, and says this in Midrash Rabbah as well, and in Gemara, purpose of the Golus is one thing. It's to bring the Goyim closer to Kadosh Baruch Hu. The final day is that Mitzrayim is going to know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world. And it's going to happen. We're not just in the footsteps of Mashiach, we're at the final step of Mashiach. It's happening. Like it says in the Megillah that if that Zeresh, his wife said to Haman, if Imi Mordechai Yehudim, that you're going to fall in front of him. If these are the Jewish people who come from Yehuda, the Jews, Mizera Yehudi, who come from the Yehuda, who come from Calev, you're not going to be able to. You're going to fall. And that's what's happening today. What's happening today is we're witnessing the final stages of the Geula. Klal Yisrael has returned to Eretz Yisrael. We have rebuilt Yerushalayim. The final pasuk that it says by Yaakov Avinu is Vayivan Sham Mizbeach. We will build a Mizbeach on Harabayis. We will build the Mishkan. We'll build the Mikdash Keva La'olam Ad. Bahalois Chesaneros is the 36th Parsha in the Torah. The 36th Parsha of the Torah. After 36 hours of creation, Hashem hid the Or HaGanuz. The Or HaGanuz was gone. And he put it away, La'asid Lavei Le'tzadikim. That Or HaGanuz was the Or HaGanuz of the menorah that Aaron lit L'doros. He lit the menorah. He lit up the 49 levels of Tehillim, Samach Zayin, that has 7 psukim with 7 words. Those words are the words that we say Motzei Shabbos. Why 49? The menorah represents 49. Has 7 7 branches. It has 11 kaftorim. It has 11 buttons. It has 9. Has 22. It has 9 flowers. It has 22 cups. Add that together, you get 49. If you open the Chumash Bereshis, the first pasuk, Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim ve'es ha'aretz, has 7 letters. The first pasuk of Shmois, ve'ele Shmois b'nei Yisrael bo Mitzrayim eis Yaakov yishu beisei bo, has 11 letters, representing the kaftorim, the buttons. Open Sefer Vayikra, the first pasuk has 17 letters. 9 letters, representing the flowers. Open by Midbar, the first pasuk has 17 letters, representing the 17 tefachim of the menorah. Open Parshas Dvarim, it has 22 words. The first pasuk, representing the 22 cups on the menorah. The menorah is the Torah. The Torah is the power that we have through action. And we say, Ein Torah k'Torahs Eretz Yisrael. There is no Torah like the Torah of Eretz Yisrael. V'lo olam yidor adam be'Eretz Yisrael afilu be'ir sheroiv ruboy oivdei kachovim v'al yidor b'chutz la'aretz afilu be'ir sheroiv ruboy talmidei chachomim shekol ha'dor b'chutz la'aretz doime k'mi she'en Elokim v'chol ha'dor be'Eretz Yisrael doime k'mi she'en Elokim. A person forever, for always, the Gemara in Ksubah says, forever should live in Eretz Yisrael, even amongst Goyim who are Oivdei Avodah Zarah. The Torah of Eretz Yisrael, the menorah of Eretz Yisrael, is alive and lit today. It is lit today more than it's ever been since the Churban. And we find that when the Beis HaMikdash was being destroyed in Eicha Rabasi, in the Akdama, in the Psicha of Eicha, the Midrash says that Hashem in Shamayim, when Avraham Avinu heard that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, he was pulling out his hair. And he said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I sacrificed Yitzchak, I went through 10 nisyonos, I did everything, and you none of my schusim help you. And he went to Yitzchak, and Yitzchak said, I stretched out my neck. And he went to Yaakov, and Yaakov said, he fought with Esav, and I did everything I did. And I raised 12 shvatim, Rashis, Oini of Ruvain, and all what happened. Hashem said, no, I'm not going to, for your schus, I'm not going to do it. Came the Aleph Beis, the Aleph said, because of me, the Aleph you should save, and because of the Beis, and every letter came, the Midrash goes for tens of pages explaining what happened. Moshe came, Aaron came. Until, who came? Who saved? Rachel. What did Rachel say? What was Rachel that Hashem said, B'shvilech Rachel ani machzer es hamikdash. B'shvilech Rachel v'shavu bonim legvulech. Ki tikva la'achrisech. There's hope for the future. Why? Rachel said, I brought a tzara into my house. I was willing to be mevater on everything. I gave away Yaakov. I gave away Yisachar Zvulun for the Dudoyim. I gave away everything. I was willing to be mevater. I was willing to give up on everything. I gave up on money. I gave up on fame. I gave up. I was called. And when Leah says to Rachel, Hagam lakachet et bali, you want to take my husband? Rachel kept quiet. She had the power of keeping quiet. That's the message of Rachel. And Rachel was the side of, on the Masoyas, on the right was Yehuda, which was Calev, on the left was, and on the right was the Aryeh, Levi Yakum, and on the west was Binyamin. The children, the daughters, the children of Rachel was Ephraim, Menashe, and Binyamin. The only side which had both Rachel and Leah was the north, was Dan, Naphtali, and Asher, who were up in the north. Naphtali was the last one in the group, even though Dan was the Shevet, and Dan represents the Choshech. That's where Shimshon HaGibor came from. Shimshon HaNazir. And Shimshon HaNazir came from Dan. He came from the north. And over there was the only side that we had both Rachel and Leah. Rachel and Leah represent two ways of serving Hashem. Are you being awakened from above, or you're being awakened from below? We have an opportunity today to be awakened from below. We can wake up. We can see how we can be a part of history, which has been predetermined, written in the Torah. It is the plan. The plan that began with the Meraglim is coming to an end today. In our times, in our days, b'mheir v'yameinu. And it's going to happen whether we are a part of it or not. At the end, the result will be the same. V'yedu kol amim, every nation in the world, and Mitzrayim will be Baruch Mitzrayim, Ami Mitzrayim, and Mitzrayim will end up being, the Bnei Chom, the Mitzrayim and Canaan will end up being one. We will be the Nachla. But the Goyim will all know the truth. The question is, can we be a part of it? Can we choose? Thank you for listening.